Oh, hi there. Ollie Anderson here. Welcome to this video where we're going to be talking about some of the universal laws that apply to all human beings. All human beings means literally all human beings. We're talking about universal truths that if you accept them and align yourself with them, work with them, then you're going to get better results in life. Because as I've said many times on this channel, and if you're new to the channel, welcome. As I've said many times, real always works. The only way that we're going to get results in life and get where we want to be is to work with reality instead of against it. And so these laws that I'm about to share with you, even though they might sound initially a bit wishy-washy because we're talking about universal truth and all this kind of stuff, there's no bullshit. They're actually just things that you will have already experienced. But if you're more aware of them, you can actually experience them in a way that is going to allow you to get better results in life. Ultimately, it all boils down to the idea that it is what it is. That's something that we often say when we've run out of ideas and we don't have any more options in life. But we say it is what it is because actually what's happened in those moments where we're saying it is we've hit up against reality. And all of the stuff that we were thinking, the map that we carried in our head that we were trying to make sense of life with, has suddenly been forced to confront the truth itself. And we found ourselves on a turning point where we basically have to start asking ourselves, okay, how can I go deeper into acceptance because these ideas I'm carrying are just not working? When that happens, we've ultimately come face to face with one of these laws. And because I truly believe and have found in my own life and I've seen in the lives of my clients that accepting reality is the biggest game changer that can help us get where we need to be and help us to trust the process of moving towards wholeness ultimately. I wanted to make this video where I break down some of these laws so that you can see, first of all, what they are, you can become aware of them, then you can accept them, but then you can start acting in alignment with them so that you can actually get better results rather than just thinking that you're doing things that you're not actually going to get anywhere with, if that makes sense. So it's going to be a super simple video. I'm just going to walk through the laws that I've noticed. There's probably more. Give a definition of what they are. Say how you can start embracing them. And then hopefully, if you do live in alignment with this, you'll see that real does always work and you'll grow more real as a consequence. You'll move towards wholeness. So let's go. So let's start right at the beginning with the most fundamental and vital of all of these universal laws. And that is the law of cause and effect. I don't care who you are, whatever you do in life, whatever you care about, whatever you like, whatever you dislike, the law of cause and effect is playing a role in your life at all times. And that's ultimately because as far as we're aware as human beings, we live in a physical universe, which is made of matter. And ultimately, that works on the principles of time, space, and causality. Cause and effect. And ultimately what that means is that if you're here and you want to be here, then there is a gap between those two states. And the only thing that is going to close that gap is making sure that you live as the cause of the effect that is going to get you there. That sounds very convoluted, but it just means if you want a certain result, which is the effect, you have to make the choices that are going to allow you to be the cause of that effect. And simple examples are, let's say you want to write a book. I like writing. If you want to write a book, that is the effect that you're trying to achieve, you're trying to attain, the effect of having a book in your hands one day. The only way that you're going to do that is to be the cause. And to be the cause in that particular scenario means that every day, or as many days as possible, you start writing, you start typing. And over time, as you move through space, well, you're going to close that gap, ultimately. That law of cause and effect is always at work, like literally always. And a lot of people don't like to accept it because it means that you actually have to do some work. You have to take responsibility and you have to use your creative capacity as a human being to figure out how you are going to become the cause of the effects that you're trying to achieve. Now, the little caveat here is that it's a lot easier if you make sure the effects that you're aiming for are actually real. If it's just something that you've decided you need to chase for the sake of your ego, and compensating for all the shame and all the bullshit that's swimming beneath the surface of your experience of yourself, then probably you're going to choose an effect that is not actually real. It's going to be something that you have just kind of plucked out of your ass so that you can feel better about the unreal relationship that you have with yourself. So sometimes, in fact, most of the time, you might have to do a little bit of inner work where you uncover your true values and true intentions and then see how that can be translated into an effect. But either way, you need to use the law of cause and effect to get where you're going. And so that is the most fundamental of the laws, and they all kind of come back to it in a sense. The second of these universal laws is the law of effort. I kind of alluded to it when I said that you need to take responsibility, but ultimately what it means, and it's very simple, so I don't need to go on about it for hours and hours, is that if you are trying to close the gap between a cause and an effect, then you're going to have to put some effort into it. That means you're going to have to take action, you're going to have to do the work, you're going to have to cultivate self-discipline so that you can live in the process of closing that gap that I keep talking about. You're going to have to understand that everything has an opportunity cost. And so if you're watching Netflix, for example, or playing video games or giving into any of your addictions, like being a rageaholic or a shopaholic or an alcoholic or whatever kind of holic you might be, then you're giving up the opportunity to actually invest your time, energy, and attention in getting to where you want to be. And so without the effort, you're not going to be able to be the cause of the effects that you need to grow real. The third of these universal laws that applies to all of us, because it's universal, is the law of averages. Really, this just comes back to this common idea that you've probably all heard, that the more shots you take, the more likely you are to score a goal or to get the ball in the net or whatever game it is that you're playing where you're taking shots. Ultimately, if you're trying to reach a certain effect by living as a certain cause, you're not always going to get the result the first time. And so ultimately, you're going to have to keep trying. And the more times you do try, well, the law of averages are going to be working in your favor. You're increasing the odds that you do get the results that you want. For example, maybe you're trying to find a partner, like you're a single person or something. The more people that you talk to, the more likely you are to find somebody who is going to be a good match for you. If you're a business person, you've got your own business, the more conversations that you have with people, the more likely you are to find a client. It's very, very simple, and it just means that ultimately, with a lot of the goals that we're chasing in this causal universe that we found ourselves in, then the more that you put yourself out there, ultimately, the more you have an abundance mindset and realize that there's more opportunities out there and that you can be outcome independent about your approach to chasing those opportunities, well, the more likely you are, by the law of averages, to get the result that you want. If you don't know that, you're going to give up too soon. If you do know that, then you're going to keep trying. You're not going to let your self-worth be determined by the results that you do get in the short term, and you're going to keep going until you've closed that gap. And so law of averages is something that you need to operate within the context of. The fourth law that applies to every single human being on the planet is the law of perspective. And the law of perspective basically just means that your perspective, the view that you take, your mindset ultimately, is going to affect the odds of you getting the results that you want to get as you close this gap that I keep talking about. So for example, if something bad happens and your perspective only focuses on the bad side of things, then you're ultimately going to become trapped and you're going to stop moving forward towards closing that gap. If you understand that good and bad are just interpretations in our brains, just perspectives that we decide to attach to because of our own emotional stuff and what we've already been through and blah, 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 blah. If you don't understand that, then the bad interpretation that you've picked up is going to be the end of the line. Instead, if you stay real and you understand that everything contains the seed of its opposite, because dualistic thinking is not actually reality itself, it's just judgment and our human interpretations. If you understand that, then you can realize that in everything bad that happens, there is going to be a lesson, there's going to be an opportunity, then you can start moving again. It also goes the other way, the law of perspective, because it's about maintaining balance and staying real as you're closing that gap. If something good happens, you need to understand that there's a cost. So let's say, for example, you were out there, you were looking for a partner, in the example I gave earlier, you used the law of averages, talked to loads of people, you finally found someone, That's a good thing. But actually, the cost of that is that by committing to that one person, you've given up all of the others. That's probably a good thing in this imaginary example, because you found somebody that you care about and you want to be with and blah, blah, blah. But it's just a reminder that there's always a cost with the good things, and there's always a lesson and an opportunity in the bad things. And things always balance out. If you keep that perspective, you're going to keep moving forward in a very real way. You're not going to be stumbling over these conceptual interpretations that we can put in our own path, and that can sometimes hold us back. So the law of perspective is going to affect the results that you get. The fifth of these laws is really simple, and I've kind of alluded to it already, but it's the law of action, the law of activity. Ultimately, as the name suggests, it's pretty simple. If you don't take action, you're not going to get where you need to be. You can't close this gap and work the process of being the cause for the effect without taking action. The only caveat here is that you need to remember to be a human being, not a human doing. Sometimes when we're so desperate to get the results that we want, we start forcing life and taking action because of our ego, rather than because of coming from an inspired place where we're connected to wholeness, connected to our realness, and we're flowing with life instead of forcing life. Either way, taking action is going to be the only thing that closes the gap. But if you're too hungry, if you're too desperate, if you're too attached, and you've invested your self-worth to getting that effect, getting that result, then you've become outcome dependent, and you're not going to be able to maintain perspective in the way that we were talking about with the previous law, and you're going to basically put too much friction and stress in your own path. And so you have to take action. Without taking action, you're never going to get anywhere. But you need to make sure that it's inspired action that is going to allow you to flow with this process, rather than putting obstacles in your own path as you move down the path to getting where you need to be. The sixth universal law that applies to everybody, something that we all know but we forget, is the law of uncertainty. This basically is just the law that we don't know everything. Like, uncertainty is the default state. Human beings are not omniscient, so we don't know everything, and we're not omnipotent, so we don't have complete control and power over everything. If you forget that, then you start forcing life through your will, through the plans in your head, and you don't learn to respond to life and grow with life by asking it questions and learning as you close this gap between cause and effect. If you don't appreciate the fact that uncertainty is the default state, then you kind of beat yourself up and you feel bad when you make mistakes, when you don't have the answers, etc., etc., etc. If you embrace uncertainty as the default state, which it always is, you can work with the chaos of life, you can grow with the chaos of life, and you can kind of trust life because you understand that you have limits as a human being, but that you can keep learning and growing so you can reach the edge of yourself and get to the next level. The reason that's so important is because if you think you have all the answers and you have complete certainty about life, you're not going to move forward in a way that is responsive. You're constantly going to be reacting as your map in your head meets the territory of reality, and you bring friction and stress and tension and so on and so forth, misery eventually. And so if you want to close the gap, you have to approach the gap with an attitude of appreciating the law of uncertainty, because only then are you going to learn and grow more real as the gap closes. The next of these laws that applies to all of us is the law of assumption. Ultimately, what this means is that the assumptions we carry about ourselves, the world, and reality are going to affect the results that we get as we go out there and try to shape the world in accordance with our vision and all that kind of stuff. Try and close that gap. If you assume, for example, that nothing is going to work out, well, it's probably not going to work out. If you assume there's a very high chance of it working out, especially if you're embracing these laws that we're talking about, like the law of averages and the law of cause and effects in itself, then you're increasing the odds that it's going to work out. And so ultimately, this is kind of like the law of attraction in a way, or the boomerang effect. What you carry within yourself, the energy that you've got, and the feelings that you have about life itself that you put out there are what's going to come back to you. The only real caveat is a lot of people, because there's a gap in or a split in their relationship with themselves between the ego and who they really are, they have a lot of unconscious assumptions that are guiding their lives. This is what causes people to sabotage their progress. They may think in their conscious mind, because they've created a kind of compensatory version of themselves to hide from their shame and all the feelings of worthlessness that are really bubbling away beneath the surface. They might think consciously that they are going to succeed, but deep down, they're carrying all kinds of horrible, ugly feelings, telling them that they're just a piece of shit or whatever it is, because of shame, guilt, and trauma from childhood. And so those unconscious intentions, those unconscious assumptions are actually going to stop them from closing that gap in the way they need to. And so you need to know that, because if you keep aiming for something, but you're not getting the results that you want to get, then there's a very, very high chance that you've got some unconscious assumption that is sabotaging your progress. But either way, the law of assumption stands, that your fundamental assumptions are going to increase the odds, not 100%, but they're going to increase the odds of you either getting or not getting the result that you want to get. So you need to be aware of that so you can align your assumptions with where you're going and be the cause of the effect that you're trying to get. The next law that I want to tell you about is the law of value. This is really, really simple, but we often forget it, especially if we're approaching life through a lens of ego, the filter of the ego, rather than blah, 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 being real. This is the law of value, and it's very, very simple. It just means if you want to get value from life, you have to give value to life. So for example, if you're in a relationship, you're only ever trying to take from your partner, take love, take whatever it is that you think you need, been needy, too needy, but you're not giving anything back, you're not giving value, then the relationship is going to end. If you're a business person, you have to give as much value as possible to your clients so that they're going to feel like they're getting what they need from the relationship and that it's worth the money they might have paid you, and so on and so forth. This isn't a transactional thing, it's a relational thing. Ultimately, it means you have a real relationship with yourself so that you know your own value, and then you can share that value with the world around you. If you don't do that, then you're going to be locked inside the box of the ego, and you're just going to be needy. You're going to be using the world as a source of filling the void within yourself. But if you can circumvent that and grow real, then you will know your value. You'll be grounded in wholeness. You'll be grounded in truth. You can give value to the world and you get more value back. Again, it comes back to this theme that was in the last law, the law of assumption. If you know your own value, you're going to give value to people. That's what you're going to get. And so all these laws are kind of interconnected, but you need to know that, because if you're trying to close this gap, then the easiest way to get the results that you want is to make sure you're giving the world the value that it needs in order to reciprocate and get you where you need to be. So give value, get value, don't just take value, otherwise you won't get where you want to be. The ninth of these laws is the law of flux. This is basically the idea that in our experience as fragmented creatures on a fragmented planet with fragmented brains, everything is changing. It's a little bit complicated in a sense, because ultimately when you transcend the world and you kind of have a taste of reality or realness, you ultimately understand that everything is connected, everything is whole. You can have a peak experience, as Abraham Maslow called them, where you feel totally connected to everything, and you realize that wholeness itself is not changing. Wholeness is whole, so of course it's not changing. But as we grow and evolve as human beings, either further away from wholeness or closer to it, then ultimately our lives, as that plays out, are just about flux and change. And if you don't understand that law, you'll keep trying to cling to your ideas. You'll cling to your self-image. You'll cling to the ego. You'll cling to your points of view. You'll cling to the familiar rather than letting go and be curious and growing and all that kind of stuff. And so the only way really that you can close this gap as a human being is to understand that things keep changing and to work with that change. And if you understand that, then you can let go of the obstacles in your brain, in your mind, in your relationship with yourself that stop you flowing and moving with life, and you will be able to kind of become part of life instead of being something that's outside of it, if that makes sense. The 10th of these laws is the law of relationships. It's already kind of been alluded to in a few of the other laws, like the law of value, for example. But ultimately, it's the idea that human beings, when we're real, are not just these independent, separate, isolated entities, but that we're connected to all other things. Ultimately, we have a relationship with ourselves, obviously. We have a relationship with other people. We have a relationship with life itself. We are relational creatures. We're not transactional creatures. We're not creatures that are just here to consume. We're not individuals in the sense that we normally think we are. We have individuality, but we're all interdependent. And if you understand that, you're going to align yourself with reality itself, because reality ultimately is just one big relationship, having a relationship with itself. And if you're not aware of that and you don't accept it, then you're not going to focus on relationships. Again, you're just going to be focusing on yourself or your ideas about yourself, the ego, and you're never, ever, ever going to be able to have a real life. And this is really important, because as you close that gap, you're going to realize more and more and more that your relationship with other people, which starts with your relationship with yourself being real, is one of the most vital pieces of the puzzle that's going to help you do it. So you're a relational being. You're not just here to consume things. You're not just here to make transactions. You're here to really relate to people and connect on a deep, deep level. There's 3 more of these laws, and then this video is done, but they're all very important. I hope you understand how important these are. The next one is the law of priority of focus. And it can be summed up with a phrase that I don't know where it came from, but you probably heard before, which is that what you give your focus to, what you give your attention to, grows. Again, this comes back to the law of cause and effect, using time and the process of moving through space to get where you need to be. But ultimately, for simplicity, we can say, if you focus on the result that you're trying to achieve, the effect that you're trying to be the cause of, and you keep your focus on it, then obviously you're more likely to get that. If you don't keep your focus on it, because you get sucked into the world, you get sucked into drama, you get sucked into bullshit, you get sucked into social conditioning, then your focus is going to be elsewhere, and you're going to be causing the effects of whatever that focus is now directed on to grow instead of what you really want. And so ultimately, the law of priority or focus is just reminding you to keep your focus on where you're going. It's very simple. Like, that's one of the biggest shifts I've seen in my own life and in the lives of my clients. If you just remind yourself daily to focus on your vision, to focus on where you're going, then you'll get there. The thing is, there's so many temptations and things in the world that are constantly clamoring for our attention. They're telling us that we need to prioritize something other than what's real. And so basically, we can sum this law up by saying, right, if you focus on what's real, you're going to get something real. If you focus on what's unreal, because of your underlying shame and guilt and trauma and emotional stuff causing you to believe in the world more than yourself, then you're going to get something unreal. So prioritize what's real and you'll get something real, because you'll stay focused on it. The next law is the law of wholeness. This is very, very simple, but again, very, very important. It's just the law that everything is moving towards wholeness. And if you don't understand that, you're going to resist and distort your relationship with life because of the fragmented version of yourself, the ego that you have identified with, and it's going to stop you moving in the way that you need to move. It's going to stop you flowing as you close the gap between cause and effect, because you're going to keep forcing everything through the fragments that you think are the truth or that you think are important, when actually they're not. They're a substitute for a true relationship with wholeness, with this flow. If you don't understand that, you're going to block your own creative drives. You're going to block the expression of your true goals and the true things within you that you need to actually be chasing in order to bring more wholeness to the surface. The short version that's come up many times on this channel, like go check some of my other videos, is that there is a dance constantly unfolding in all of our lives between the ego, the identity we picked up, and the shadow self, the version of ourselves that we've been hiding from. This causes us to be fragmented. And if you want to be whole, you have to let go of the ego, so all of these parts that you've disowned of yourself can resurface and then be expressed in the world as you chase or go about the natural flow of bridging this gap between cause and effect in alignment with wholeness, instead of some other illusory thing that you might have picked up. You need to know that so that what you are moving towards is real. The final law that I want to share in this video is the law of acceptance. And it's very simple, once again, but ultimately everything comes down to it. It's the idea that the only thing you can do with reality is accept it. You can hide from it, you can pretend it's not there, but that's not really doing anything because it's not going to get you any results, and it's going to take you in a totally cockamamie direction where you're eventually going to have to return back to reality anyway, because it never goes anywhere. What's real is always real. And so the final law is just embracing that. All of these laws that I've shared apply to everybody, but if you don't accept them, you're not going to be living in a real way. You're going to just be an idea. You're going to be a concept. But if you truly, truly want to live a life that is meaningful and where you're moving towards your goals in a real way, and you know that they are real goals, then you need to accept reality. It's that simple. Everything ultimately comes down to that. If you don't accept it, you're going to lack awareness. And if you lack awareness, you're basically just going to be wasting your time doing something that's not real. And the actions that you're going to be taking are going to take you further away from the truth rather than closer towards it. And that's just going to exacerbate all of the problems that you may already have in your life, because the only reason that you wouldn't accept reality is because you're trying to hide behind ego so that you don't have to face your emotional stuff. So hopefully that video made sense to you. Hopefully it's made a few things click. The short version of everything that I've just said is if you accept reality and work with it by embracing these laws and using them as a kind of guideline for chasing whatever it is that you're chasing in life and making sure that that's real, then you're going to get where you need to be, because you're constantly going to be moving towards wholeness instead of resisting it by hiding behind the little illusory fragments that you've picked up whilst you've been shaken from reality because of the past. But just because the past was unreal doesn't mean the future has to be. All you need to do is understand, raise awareness of how reality works, move with it, and you can pretty much get wherever it is that you need to be. So that was the video. Hope everyone's doing good. If you've got any questions or anything like that, you can book a call on my website, ollyanderson.co.uk/talk. Stay real. Thanks a bunch. Boom.